up, everybody? What's up? Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. I am Dave Smith, and I am rolling solo for this one. Rob is out on the road, and he's getting ready. I think he's getting on a plane today, and then I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, and we're going to meet down in Tampa. We'll be doing shows the whole weekend at Side Splitters down there, which is like one of my favorite clubs in the country. Always have a great time down there. So really looking forward to it. I hope to see some of you guys out there. If you'd like to come, there still are some tickets available. comicdavesmith.com to go grab some. And yeah, hope to see you guys there. Looking forward to a fun weekend. All right. So for today's show, as you guys know, typically when it's just me, and I do a solo show, I usually like to kind of, I have like a topic, a broader topic, and then I rant about it for an hour. Today, I don't really have anything like that in mind. There's several different things that have happened over the last few days that I wanted to address. So, I'll still be ranting for an hour, but there's several different topics, and I kind of wanted to hit a few of them. And I don't know, we'll see how much time I spend on each one. But a few things have happened that have really caught my eye that are in the news today. And a couple of the stories are somewhat related, but it's not exactly like it all has one clear thread. So I guess I'll start with this. There's a couple of controversies. I don't know. I guess I'm always involved in a controversy now, but there's specifically been two over the last couple days that I did not address. And one of them I meant to address in the show yesterday, but just it never came up. And I think I had planned on pointing this out toward the end of the show, and I might have slightly mentioned this, but I don't think I really got into it. So let's just do that now. So I was I guess the guys over Steven Crowder and his co-host Morgan were, I don't know, they were trashing me a little bit on the show or something. I saw Steven Crowder, it's like with all these things, like I don't watch Steven Crowder's show, but I get tagged on Twitter whenever he says something about me. And we had like gone back and forth a couple times when he was kind of like criticizing me during the war with Iran. And then I guess recently he was criticizing me too. And he also said on his show, he said at one point that I refuse to go on his show, that I don't show up or something like that, which is like blatantly not true. Literally when he called me out a couple months ago and issued like a public invite for me to come on the show, and I said, sure, I'll do that. And then we never locked down a date. It was like I think we spoke, and then I was like, oh, I'm traveling this week, and then I could do it next week. And then they were like, okay, well, we're off next week. How about the following week? And I was like, well, I'm pretty busy that week. And then we just didn't lock down a date. But like, it wasn't like they kept following up and I kept ignoring or something like that. Like we just never locked it down. I forgot about it. Other things come up. There's just a lot of shit going on. So I thought that was kind of odd for him to like be saying publicly that I'm like refusing to show. So of course I was like, hey, I already agreed to. And then anyway, we messaged back and forth, and we still haven't locked down a date, but like I'm open to do it. So I gave them a date that works for me next week, and I haven't heard back yet. So we'll see. But anyway, just kind of wanted to correct the record on that. But so they, I don't know, they were, I didn't see the segment until after we recorded yesterday's show. But the segment was essentially the why aren't you celebrating if you were against this thing, was essentially what their line was. And I just think, I don't know, I find this to be really, really stupid. And I dealt with this on yesterday's show. So there was like no need to go, like, I was like, I already responded to this, even though I wasn't responding to him. I was responding to Ben Shapiro and all of the rest of them all saying the exact same thing. However, I guess there was this one tweet, which I had like, not even, I didn't even think there was something remotely controversial about this, but evidently this is what the Zionists are very upset at me for. But so I had heard back, because I still have, like I got some normies. I don't even know what to call them. Let's just say I got people who are like, like fans of mine, or people who I know in this world who get a lot of shit for being fans of mine, or who get a lot of shit for like having me on their podcast or whatever, because they're like they also have Zionist friends who are like, how dare you platform this Jewish Nazi or whatever. But so this was evidently a big controversy that all the Zionists on Twitter were saying proves what a horrible person I am or something. So let me just pull up the tweet here, because I think if I read this, you will be like, well, I really am not seeing the controversy there. So here, this is number one. So this is what I said. I was talking to Morgan, who is Steven Crowder's co-host on his show, and he had tweeted something about the celebrating the end of a genocide thing. And so I just tweeted back and I said, it's great that the ceasefire is held for a few days and hostage swaps are taking place, but this is a pathetic attempt at a gotcha. The demand to celebrate before we even know if this nightmare is over makes no sense. That was essentially the tweet. And if you don't like see anything controversial with that, that's because you're not like an insane Zionist. But the thing that people objected to there was that I said hostage swaps. And so they jumped on this immediately and they were like, hostage swaps, what are you talking about? This is the only hostages are the ones in Gaza. The people Israel are releasing are terrorists. And in fact, see if I could find this here, but the Babylon Bee guy, let me see if I can find this, because he specifically said it, which I appreciated that he just said it out loud. Both of the Babylon Bee guys, Seth Dillon, said hostage swaps is dishonest framing meant to create an illusion of moral equivalence where none exists. But his partner actually went a bit further, and let me see if I could say, but anyway, I'm looking at a whole bunch of people. Alex Berenson, of course, had to jump in on it. Hostage swaps. Once again, Dave tells us who he really is. Hold on, I want to find the one from the other. I swear I'll stop reading tweets in a second, but I did want to find the one from the other Babylon Bee guy, because he really actually kind of said the quiet part out loud, if you ask me. And we could go through this and we could see who here is being crazy. Okay, so Joel Berry, the other guy, he says, hostage swaps, ? You mean Israel getting 20 hostages in exchange for almost 2,000 psychotic terrorists, many of whom are guilty of stabbing, shooting, and raping innocent men, women, and children to death. Is that what you really mean by hostage swaps? So, just to be clear about this, all right? When I said hostage swaps, I meant hostage swaps. And I don't care. It's like, look, he literally said, this is what I find so interesting, is he says 2,000 psychotic terrorists. Now, this to me was just a great example of the disconnect that has really come to define American politics over the last 2 years. So these guys are like, and again, it's not, I don't even hate the Babylon Bee guys. I don't know. These were guys who were like, probably would have had nothing but nice things to say about me pre-October 7th. They did some funny stuff on other issues, and I think probably they were pretty good on COVID. Would have to double check that, but I feel like probably they were. And so I kind, it's like, kind of like them on that. They were definitely good on wokeism and some other issues that I care about, probably immigration, if I had to guess. But so I'm not saying it's not that you guys are like evil, psychotic people. It's more like you're animated by some evil spirit or something like that. Like when it comes to this issue, it just takes over your mind. But from your perspective, obviously, yes, like everybody on the Israeli side is an angel and everybody on the Palestinian side is a savage. And so it seems crazy that I would even say hostage swaps. Like, I mean, we all know, as Joel Berry just said, all the 2,000 over there, they're all terrorists. By definition, I mean, they're Palestinian, right? So they're all terrorists, except that's not true. And this is widely reported and admitted by the Israelis. 1,700 of the 2,000 that Israel released were people that Israel was holding with no charges, let alone a trial. They haven't been charged with anything. No military tribunal, no criminal trial, obviously, nothing, not even charged with crimes. So yeah, like there's this interesting dynamic, and it's funny because they decide to pick this fight, but then they are like totally unprepared to have it. In fact, I don't think they've even like thought this through. But just to be clear, by the way, for those of you guys who want to immediately say, well, hey, this is wartime, and so not everybody gets charges. It's like, okay, there's 1,700 people they rounded up in Gaza. But, on top of that, this is what Israel's been doing to Palestinians since way before the last 2 years. So if you want to say it's wartime, well, then the war has been going on since 1947. Like they just do this to Palestinians all the time. Israel over the years has held thousands and thousands of Palestinian prisoners, many of whom never receive charges or a trial. And then the ones who do go in front of like military tribunals, I think they have like a 99% conviction rate or something like that. Like essentially, it's all bullshit. And anyway, so it is viewed as it's just a given that all of these, as he says, all of them are terrorists. All of them. Okay, now, according to an Israeli database, they estimated that 75% of the prisoners that Israel was holding were not fighters. This is what they. So you're talking about if we are working on like modern civilization standards, then yes, these are innocent people. They get the presumption of innocence. If you think of them as people, if you don't think of them as all as subhuman, if you think of them as human beings, then yes, they get the presumption of innocence. It's one of the things, and again, this is the dynamic that comes up constantly in the Israel-Palestine like debate, is that so they say, like there was one man, I'm blanking on who it was who made this statement, but it was a high-level Israeli official. And it was from earlier this year. And they said, because somebody had asked them about the settlers in the West Bank and how vicious they are toward the Palestinians. And, there are constantly these there's constantly incidents in the West Bank where, settlers will attack Palestinians, they take their homes, there's all types of things that happen. And one of the Israeli officials said, he said, listen, that's a police matter. And there was something kind of revealing about that, because he was basically going like, look, we're talking foreign policy right now. And you're talking about a domestic police matter. Like, yeah, things happen. This is a country, like as if like someone, you were discussing with Barack Obama or something, or Donald Trump, our policy in Syria. And then someone said, well, look at the people shooting each other in Chicago. And they were like, yeah, but that's a police matter. This is a military matter. But of course, the obvious difference here is that if a terrorist in the West Bank were to attack an Israeli settler, which also happens at times, see, that's terrorism. So it's terrorism if they do it, but it's a police matter if it's done by the other side. There's this constant double standard that must always be applied. Otherwise, you just see the thing for what it is. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Quince. Why drop a fortune on clothing staples when you don't have to? Quince has all the good stuff at even better prices. We're talking high quality fabrics, classic fits, and lightweight layers for the summer at prices that won't break the bank. With cashmere and cotton sweaters from just $50, airy pants and flow knit polos that look and feel amazing, your wardrobe just got a whole lot better. I can tell you, I really like the clothing from Quince. They sent me a couple articles. I got a cashmere hoodie that's really comfortable and looks really good. And it was $50, very reasonably priced for a cashmere hoodie. Go check them out for yourself at quince.com/POTP for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's Quince, QUINCE.com/POTP for free shipping and 365-day returns. One more time, quince.com/POTP. All right, let's get back into the show. And so now I don't know about this last batch of 20, the final 20 hostages that got out. I'm not sure what the percentage is there, but of the hostages in general who were taken on October 7th and have been held in Gaza, many of whom got out earlier, many of whom died, and the last 20 just got out. A huge percentage of them, like a good chunk of them, were IDF soldiers. Now, part of this is because Israel is, a military state. Like everybody serves in the IDF except the super religious communities there. So there's like some religious exemptions, but everybody else serves in the IDF. And so, okay, but those are still soldiers. That's still military. Like it's just it objectively speaking, when there is a conflict like this, holding a military guy and holding a civilian are not the same thing. But again, however you feel about either, it's just different. The point I'm making is that to people like the Babylon Bee guys or, dummies like Alex Berenson, they will say, this is just so appalling that you would even suggest there are hostages on both sides. Everyone knows every Israeli held in Gaza is an innocent angel, and every Arab held by Israel is a terrorist. But that's just not true. It's just like, that's just them presuming the conclusion. The fact is that the overwhelming majority of the people who Israel just released were people who had never been charged with anything, and according to their own database, not fighters. Like it was 2,000, 1,700 had no choice. And then they said 75% of that 1,700 were not fighters. So no, it's just not true. Like these were also people being held. And, again, if you're an IDF soldier and you've been, militarily occupying Palestine for 60 years, and over the last 2 years have been destroying Gaza, it is a little bit of a different calculation. Now, that being said, I was still rooting for those guys to go home. That's why I said it's great that the hostage swaps are happening. But again, it is simply not living in reality. And look, again, I'm not saying this from there's like a hysterical leftist way of talking about bigotry, and that's never been me. People have their bigotries, and that's that. It's not great. It's particularly ugly when horrific violence is being inflicted on that group of people, because that's what actually matters. Not like what you think or what you say. What actually matters is what you do to other people. But the level of almost cartoonish bigotry that you have to go, they're all terrorists. I don't need to know anything else about them. The IDF snatched them. They're a terrorist. Even just factoring in mistakes that a government made. If they got 2,000 convictions on something, you'd go, well, it's quite possible that not all 2,000 of them are guilty. We know how government does at everything. It's not as if they're so much better at courts. It's just because the DMV said you did something wrong doesn't mean you did. And it's true for government courts too. And in fact, obviously there's been lots of, guilty verdicts that have been overturned over the years. But the idea that even when no charges, they haven't even been charged with anything, let alone convicted in a trial, you can just say with a certainty they're all terrorists and then be offended by my comment. This is the thing that's just wild, and it's amazing to watch. It's like a slave master turning around and being offended at a comment that somebody made walking by. Dude, you're offended that I said hostage swaps after you've been cheering on the destruction of a captive people for 2 years. For 2 years, as all of Gaza has been destroyed, you've been cheering it on. As politicians go and sign bombs that are going to go be dropped on real human beings, as they blockade food, as they don't allow food in for months after leveling the place against a stateless captive people, in air forces dropping bombs on a captive people that do not have a military, let alone an air force to defend themselves with. You've been cheering that on, but now you turn around and you're morally appalled that I didn't in my mind convict all of the people who have never been charged with anything. Sorry. This is just, it's too ridiculous. And I just felt like I had to respond to that a little bit. Okay, so that's number one. And then number two is a video that at least I saw. I'm not sure if this originated with Dinesh D'Souza, but I did see that he posted it, and a lot of people were jumping on this. It is, I think, equally ridiculous to this other stuff. I do particularly find, you know, Dinesh D'Souza is, you know, we were supposed to debate at one point, and I'm not sure what happened with that. I'd still be down to do that if he wanted to. But one of the things I appreciate about Dinesh D'Souza is that he was essentially a neocon who admits he was wrong about everything. He admits he was wrong about the war in Iraq, wrong about foreign policy general, that he bought into a lot of the lies, and, you know, all this stuff. And, you know, what I guess I appreciate that, because, you know, not everybody does that. But at the same time, there is something about cheerleading a war that was just anybody who knew anything should have had a responsibility to be able to know that this was complete bullshit. Like, all the information was completely available. But whatever, you got it wrong, you got tricked, and you advocated for a policy where 1 million people got killed, trillions of dollars were wasted, tens of thousands of our bravest young boys, you know, committing suicide in the wake of the whole thing, not thousands that were killed in the thing. I just kind of feel like you should go away forever. Maybe that's unfair of me. Maybe that's unfair. I just think you should go away forever. I don't think you should ever talk about politics again. You know, you get something that goddamn wrong, and you should go away. I actually think it's kind of reasonable. But anyway, he kind of has, but not completely. But he posted this video, and of course I'll read his tweet along with it. But this is a video of allegedly what he calls a Muslim Brotherhood jihadi. Explains. So he says, a Muslim Brotherhood jihadi explains with a tone of incredulity and excitement how Tucker Candace and some others on the right are helping the cause of radical Islam worldwide. Now, full disclosure, I have no idea if this guy is actually a member of the Muslim Brotherhood or what this is. I just have the video here. That is what you see. But let's play this video and let's respond to Dinesh D'Souza a little bit here.
That we're seeing now, right-wing bases. Who would have thought that Tucker Carlson, of all people, would sit there and be the #1 advocate against Zionism in America today? Candace Owens, did you guys see the Ted Cruz interview where Tucker Carlson rips into Ted Cruz and just completely destroys him? Matt Walsh likewise, and there's a huge Marjorie Taylor Greene. Sean King said to me when we were in the car once, he said, Sammy, you don't understand who Marjorie Taylor Greene is. She's the representative of the most racist area in Georgia. African Americans were told not to go to her area. She's now one of the loudest advocates against Zionism. But here's my point about the Ummah when you said that we've done everything we can. Why has that change taken place? Because we've started to deploy a power that we haven't maxed out yet. Trump is looking at Tucker Carlson, who's saying we shouldn't get involved. Candace Owens, we shouldn't get involved. Matt Walsh, we shouldn't get involved. Dave Smith, Trump needs to be impeached if he goes into Iran. So Donald Trump, because of that scream, because of you here in Kuala Lumpur, because of us in London, because of those in Berlin, in Rome, because we actually decided to speak about it, because it became relevant, because we decided to tweet about it, because we decided to because we decided to do da'wah at last instead of sleeping, what happened was Trump instead went to the Iranians and said to them, listen, I need a way out. I'm going to send 2 bombers. They're going to bomb, but what did Israel say? These 3 sites. Your scream, your voice, it has power. It shifted an entire U.S. foreign policy. It stopped Trump from intervening in Iran itself. And this is the whole point. When people say, why come to Kuala Lumpur? Why go to these places? It's because the power is not there like you think it is. The power is here. We are achieving results. They said that when Trump comes to power, it will be disastrous, like for Muslims in America. Mahmoud Khalil, arrested, released. Rumaysat Ostur, arrested, released. Mohsen Mahdawi, arrested, released. American Muslims for Palestine, tried in Michigan, the case was dropped. Tried in Nevada, the case was dropped. They tried to pass the anti-boycott bill, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she pulled it. They tried to do a non-profit killer bill where the Attorney General would have the unilateral right to remove a tax-exempt status. Guess who removed that clause from the bill? Christian churches who said, why is Zionism intervening in terms of how we decide our non-profit? The reality is that people are making an effort and it's working.
All right. So now, look, Dinesh, of course, in what I find to be a very dishonest way, is not actually making any claims, but he's playing this video and kind of leaving it like, oh, doesn't this say everything you need? You know, that's always, by the way, one of the tells when you're being duped by political commentators is when they don't actually say the part, they just leave you to infer it, because it's usually them going like, well, I know I can't really say anything about this, so I'll just kind of leave it here. Well, look, the Muslim Brotherhood sure seems to like what you guys are doing, or something like that. I just find this, particularly from someone like Dinesh D'Souza, who has, I mean, look, by his own admission, gotten issues of wars in the Middle East catastrophically wrong, to like use this cheapest of tricks that, hey, look, these guys in the Muslim Brotherhood who probably don't like Israel are thrilled that you guys are criticizing Israel. Just because obviously the point there being, right, that like, let's say we had the platform and the voice that we have today in 2002. Let's say guys like me and Scott Horton and Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, where he is now, you know what I mean? Like guys like this, let's say we had all had large voices in 2002. And we were standing up against the invasion of Iraq that Dinesh D'Souza cheer led for. You know, we were trying to stop people like Dinesh D'Souza from getting 1 million people killed. Well, quite possibly Saddam Hussein and his sons and his men would have been thrilled. They would have stood to gain a lot by that. Maybe one of them would have even said, it's great that these guys over there are standing up about this. But again, what does that prove? It doesn't prove anything. Like, any time that you have an opinion on foreign policy, there will be other groups who benefit or lose as a result of that, right? So like, if you are a supporter of what America did during World War II, well, then there's probably a lot of communists who really agreed with your take on that. So it was really good for the communists that America joined the war and fought on their side and partnered with Joseph Stalin. Does that prove that you're like a Stalinist or something like that? Does that prove that you're a puppet of Joseph Stalin? No. This just means that you had a view on that policy. I mean, it does prove in some degree you're willing to partner with the communists in that particular example, but like any one of these conflicts, right? But whether you're on the side of the war or you're against the war, there's going to be an entire faction who agrees with you. You know, there's probably a whole lot of Shiites in Iraq who are happy that George W. Bush invaded. I mean, not, you know, a lot of them got killed in the fighting, but like ultimately would have been happy at the idea of Saddam being overthrown. Again, it's just like a cheap trick. This doesn't prove anything. And as far as, look, obviously this guy, whoever he is getting a lot of things wrong. I mean, like, I don't know, black people can't go into Marjorie Taylor Greene's district or something like that. And no, I don't think just because he said it doesn't mean that actually what's moving my podcast or what I say on the Joe Rogan show or what I say on Tucker's show or on a debate or something like that, that's being determined in Malaysia. Is that what you think, Dinesh? That's what's happening? It's like, look, like I remember reading about this, like, okay, so when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, there was, the Soviet Union had invaded Afghanistan in 1980. There was, the US had essentially been attempting to lure the Soviet Union into an invasion of Afghanistan. And they had been arming the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, including Osama bin Laden, kind of like the proto Al-Qaeda organization. And when the Soviet Union collapsed, Osama bin Laden and his fighters, they all in their minds were like, we did that. We lured them into this war and we bled them dry and left them running and we destroyed the Soviet Union. That was the Al-Qaeda takeaway from the Soviet Union collapsing. And also The American takeaway was that we destroyed the Soviet Union because we got them into this war in Afghanistan and got them to bleed themselves dry, and all of our, containment policies and all this stuff. And then also, like, the people of the republics and the other satellites that were controlled by the Soviet Union, they also thought they were responsible for bringing the Soviet Union down. Now, the truth is, I don't know, it's like, I don't know, maybe all these factors, everybody played in a little bit, but like, it's from this guy's perspective, it might be the case that, oh, it's because we're making so much noise that these people in America started to turn on Israel. But it's just not true. It's not true with any of the people he's named. Like, there's just no way. There's no way that any reasonable person could be convinced that Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens or myself or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or who were the other people who he listed there. I think that those were definitely most of them. You think any of us were taking our cues from the Muslim Brotherhood? Like, that's what we got. I've never cited a Muslim Brotherhood source in my life. I mean, like, what are you talking about? Because it had nothing to do with anything you were saying in Indonesia or Malaysia or Egypt or wherever. What happened is just that Israel has way too much influence on our government, and what they're doing to the Palestinians is just too horrible. And people saw that. That's it. That's the whole scandal right there. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is My Patriot Supply. The cold weather will be here before you know it. And you might ask yourself, if the power goes out when it's really cold and you have no way of keeping you and your family warm, what would you do? Well, you might want to check out the Vesta off-grid space heater from our friends over at My Patriot Supply. It's a space heater that doesn't use electricity. It runs on something called canned heat, which is an indoor safe fuel. With the Vesta stashed in your closet, you know you can keep warm no matter what happens, and it doubles as a stove to boil water or cook food, which is pretty cool. A must-have for people who want to be prepared. Go check them out. And the best part is you can go get the Vesta and a bunch of other free gifts when you order the winter prep special from My Patriot Supply. Just go to mypatriotsupply.com/problem to see everything included. This offer won't last long, and neither will this nice fall weather. So go check out mypatriotsupply.com/problem today. That's mypatriotsupply.com/problem. All right, let's get back into the show. So I don't know. I guess it's my punishment in life is that I got to respond to some of these, ridiculous kind of controversies that are made up. But again, this one too, there's just nothing to that. It just simply doesn't prove anything that there'd be some group there who might also agree with you. It's like, again, like, not to make like ridiculous examples, but down to like, being like, Hitler loved dogs. You know what I mean? Like, if you love dogs, that doesn't mean you're somehow on the same team or sympathetic to Adolf Hitler. And if you are for almost any policy you could think of, there will be people who you probably don't agree with on a lot of other things who will be for that policy also. It's just, that's what happens. And so if you are an immigration restrictionist, there will probably be some racists who like what you're saying there. If you are, for open borders, there'll probably be some anti-white racists who really like what you're saying there. But that doesn't mean that neither of those are an argument against restricting borders or opening borders. Like, it's just not, it doesn't follow. It's a very low IQ way of viewing politics, that, oh, if anybody else ever agrees with you on something, that is what? I mean, you're not exactly saying, but you're posting the video and kind of leaving it to your audience to determine that we're stooges of the Muslim. I mean, like, for example, there's also radical Islamist groups. I mean, for example, right? The Houthis in Yemen, who have been one of the big enemies of all of these Zionists, right? They, of course, were attacking some ships and trying to cause problems for Israel, and at certain points the United States of America, over what they claim was their protest over the treatment of the Palestinian people. Okay, those are the Houthis. They were in a big civil war with Al-Qaeda for years. It was Al-Qaeda on one side and the Houthis on the other. So every time you're bombing the Houthis, you know who's pretty happy about that? Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. You know, like if I had a video of some Al-Qaeda guy saying he really loved that Israel took out the Houthis, would you ever imagine me holding that over Dinesh D'Souza's head? I mean, these guys, by the way, in Libya, Syria, and Yemen, supported fighting on the side of Al-Qaeda. So you throw Muslim Brotherhood at me, Dinesh D'Souza, I raise you one Al-Qaeda. Actual enemies of the American people. Not just the enemies of the military dictatorship that the US props up in Egypt. Enemies of the American people, Al-Qaeda. By the way, isn't there something interesting? I always thought this was like an interesting dynamic, but that at the end, because the neocons essentially got kind of like their first hold on power in the Reagan administration. I think a couple of them went back to Ford, but I think for the most part, it was in the Reagan administration that they kind of got in. And like for people who know the history of this, there was like Team B at the CIA, and they were, you know, they were Cold Warriors, and they were always, you know, back then, this is when they were first like kind of establishing their relationships with the military industrial complex. And they would always, Team B was famously known for like just coming up with ridiculous like war propaganda, like WMD type hoaxes, but with the Soviet Union, who certainly did have a lot of WMDs, but they would always be cranking out this intelligence that the threat was much worse than it is. This is literally leading up to the collapse of the Soviet Union, like, which they did not see coming at all. And in fact, a few of the neocons were on record calling out Reagan for being like not nearly hawkish enough with the Soviet Union, because this, you know, I think the George Will line was that he guaranteed another century of Soviet dominance or something like that. And like a few years later, the whole thing collapsed. So they weren't exactly, even back then, they were really, really stupid and wrong about all of their views. But they would do these things where like, Team B, this is, would do things where like, I remember one of the examples, it's been a long time since I read about this, but like one of the examples was that they were claiming that the Russians had developed these like crazy high-tech subs that they did not have at all. And then they would run the other teams in the CIA would be like, no, I mean, we checked on the radar and nothing's picking up. But then Team B would say, that's proof that they've developed subs that are undetectable by radar. So like whatever evidence you had to them, they always had, you know, some thing about how, no, really, see, that just proves that we're right. But anyway, the dynamic that was really interesting is that this young developing neoconservative movement and Al-Qaeda, or the prototype kind of Al-Qaeda, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. But this was because there was in Afghanistan, there was like a local Mujahideen, but then there were also like the foreign Arab fighters who, like Bin Laden, you know, Saudis and stuff who came in. And so both the neocons and Al-Qaeda, like their takeaway was that we just defeated the Soviet Union. It was just kind of interesting to me that they end up being, you know, on opposing sides of the war on terrorism, like the George W. Bush government versus Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. But they both kind of had this origin story of their battle with the Soviet Union. Anyway, just kind of nerdy, interesting history stuff. Okay, so those are the two controversies I wanted to get out of the way. And I did, okay, let's go to the Gavin Newsom video. I'll be quick on that, and then I'll get to the final topic that I wanted to talk about today. So let's go to, I just thought this was interesting because this was, Gavin Newsom was just recently, who almost by default still seems to be the best the Democrats have right now, which is really wild to think about. But like, it's, you know, you start thinking about where we actually are in the schedule or the calendar of this whole thing, which is a little easy to lose sight of because number one, Donald Trump has this weird thing of being president for 4 years, out for 4 years, back for 4 years, which we haven't seen in my lifetime. That has happened before, but we haven't seen it in many years. And so you kind of, it almost feels like his first term, but you realize, no, this is his second term. And of course, Joe Biden being the candidate in 2020 and then most of 24 left you in a situation where like the last Democrat who he had a 4-year term, but obviously he has no hope of coming back. I think he just started radiation treatment. He's not coming back to be president. He couldn't even finish his run the second time. Kamala Harris was uniquely terrible, and so she came in, and nobody thinks she's seriously going to have a shot at winning the nomination. And no new star has emerged. We're starting to get pretty late in the game. I mean, there's still some time, but like, you'd kind of have to be planning it at this point, or at least coming up pretty soon. And so anyway, no new star. And so Gavin Newsom is almost by default left. You have this party that is in the trash can, is the most like toxic, unpopular brand in America right now. And Gavin Newsom is just kind of there as the well-spoken governor. Okay. But at the same time, you're like, Gavin Newsom, first off, your state's a disaster. He's a transparently slimy politician, which is really not what this moment is calling for. And when it comes to the major divisive issue over the last 2 years, this is what he had to say. He got asked about AIPAC. Anyway, let's play the clip and then we'll discuss.
Interesting. You're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years, which is interesting.
I will not vote for a candidate that takes $1 from AIPAC.
It's interesting. I mean, it's interesting. I haven't thought about AIPAC. And it's interesting. You're like the first to bring up AIPAC in years, which is interesting. Why did I say that? Not relevant to my day-to-day life.
Okay.
Which is just interesting.
Listen,
it's interesting you say that. JPAC perhaps more, but AIPAC less and less.
Okay, fair enough.
Which is just interesting.
What's interesting about it?
That it's just interesting as you bring up AIPAC that it hasn't been part of. I'm just reflecting quite openly and honestly. Hasn't been part of the day-to-day.
Yeah. The only reason why I ask is because with that, what I'm talking about is lobbying in and of itself.
So there is like, if uncomfortability could come to life and be a human for 20 seconds. I mean, he said the word interesting like 27 times. He's just so clearly uncomfortable. And he just said interesting so many times. And then the guy goes, why is that interesting? And it's like, because I don't think about it. Like, okay. Yeah, I guess in a way it's kind of interesting. Who the hell hasn't been thinking about this? Who the hell hasn't been thinking about the Israel lobby over the last couple of years? I don't know. It's bizarre is what it is. But clearly it was just like a moment where you're like, hey, how the hell does this guy possibly overcome being scared to death to take any stand on what is up there with like the biggest issues in politics today? Now, you could say, hey, look, it's still late 2025, or you're hoping by 2028, this isn't, as white hot of an issue or something like that. But there's something about being so terrified of taking a position. And you could see it in him, right? Where it's kind of similar in a way to the dynamic I talked about with Charlie Kirk a lot, where he was caught between the rock and a hard place of the young people and the donors. On the Democratic side of things, people are overwhelmingly against what Israel's just done. And of course, when you're talking about liberals and leftists, if you bring up a lobbying group, they're already just totally pre-wired to be skeptical of money in politics, right? And so it's just to take a pro AIPAC position would be like just death amongst your constituents. But then to take an anti-AIPAC position would be the death of your donor class, and you would get just a whole bunch of problems for that. There's a huge cost to be paid for being a critic of Israel at that level of politics. And one of the things that's drastically changed over the last couple of years is that maybe there's not a huge cost, I guess, to being me or, you know, like to being a podcaster who wants to say what you want to say. Well, there's a pretty big audience for that these days. And at least at the very moment we're talking about, we're not living through like a mass censorship moment in the way that we were just a few years ago. So like for the moment, I can say this stuff and it's like, okay, it doesn't look like I'm getting kicked off of YouTube or iTunes or Twitter or something like that. But if you want to be, as we saw, right, as was demonstrated with Charlie Kirk losing $2 million for, you know, platforming Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and maybe someone else, there's still a price to be paid for that. And at this level of politics, there's an enormous price to be paid. It's not a coincidence that nobody at that level of politics is ever an Israel critic. I mean, just think about that for a second. I think about how you know, I was going to say divided, but I don't even know how divided the population is over this question. But it's at least a huge portion of the population that is totally opposed to Israel, but yet they'll never be represented at the top of politics, right? And so anyway, I just thought this was interesting because it kind of shines a light on a dynamic that is a real problem for the Democrats, just an unbelievable political problem that they have going forward. And you do wonder how you can possibly bridge this gap. I mean, what can you do? You're gonna, like, your plan is to be neutral and just say strange over and over or interesting over and over. I was like, I don't know. Don't think that's going to cut it. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Vandy Crisps. Did you know that all chips and fries used to be cooked in tallow up until the 1990s when big corporations switched to cheap processed seed oils? Well, now there's Vandy Crisps. They decided to do something about this. They created a tasty and delicious potato chip with just 3 ingredients and no seed oils. That grass-fed beef tallow is not just for flavor, it's packed with nutrients, which are great for your skin, your brain, and your hormones. And snacking on Vandy chips is nothing like eating regular chips. With Vandy, you feel satisfied, light, and energetic with no crash, bloat, or gross sluggish feeling afterward. Vandy is 100% American made with 0 compromises. It's the best chip you will ever have. And if you're ready to give them a try, go to vandycrisps.com/Dave and use the promo code Dave for 25% off your first order. That's vandycrisps.com/Dave, promo code Dave for 25% off your first order. And if you don't feel like ordering online, Vandy is now available nationwide at your local Sprouts supermarket. Stop by and pick up a bag before they're gone. Or once again, go to vandycrisps.com/Dave and get 25% off your first order. All right, let's get back into the show. All right. Finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about, actually a few other things I wanted to talk about, but probably the last thing we'll have time for. And I guess it's kind of like there's 2 different stories here that I thought were kind of related. And so one of them is has to do with Nick Fuentes, who I just had on the show, as many of you saw. So Nick Fuentes evidently, now I'm not sure about the details of this. I don't know if he was reinstated and then kicked off, or if he like started a new thing and then it got kicked off, but he put his show on Spotify and evidently it rose up to being #1 on the Spotify charts. Now I don't know exactly how the Spotify charts like measure the rankings. I believe they changed it a bit over the last year or so, but they certainly I know because I've shot up on that chart before, never to #1. I believe at #2 for a little while, like right after, maybe it was like right after the Douglas Murray debate or something like that. But they give you, like, if you got a lot of action in a moment, you can shoot up those charts. But clearly there was like a ton of excitement for Nick Fuentes' show to be there. It's a real accomplishment to make it up to #1 on those charts, however the hell they exactly measure them. And that seems pretty organic to me. I mean, I know the episode we had Fuentes on was our most viewed episode we've ever done of Part of the Problem. And he's done a whole bunch of other shows that are huge. His show is doing enormous numbers. And then Spotify kicked him off. And there is I don't know. There's something about that is really fascinating to me. And part of it is that you would just think that even from the point of view of the censorious desiring people, the people who are happy to see Nick Fuentes' show get kicked off, it is interesting, right, that you would think like the last 10 years would give them a lot of pause about doing this. I mean, Nick Fuentes is one of the most censored people on social media and has been for quite a while now, for a good portion of the last, what was it, 6 years ago, I think he got kicked off YouTube and then got kicked off a lot of other stuff. And then a few years, like 5 years ago, I think he had got debanking and was put on a no-fly list and this type of stuff. Or at least that's what he says. I don't know. I haven't seen his banking records, but I don't think he's lying about that. And he's bigger than ever. Like, you threw all of this at him and he's bigger than ever. Wouldn't you think you would look at this and go, hey, maybe that's not going to work? Donald Trump got kicked off of everything, including Twitter. Donald Trump got kicked off of Twitter and Facebook. Like it was at the end of his presidency. He was the sitting president of the United States of America and couldn't tweet. And then he was banned on almost everything. And look how that worked out. It turns out it didn't vanquish Donald Trump or any of Donald Trump's supporters. And at this point, the idea that you're gonna try to squash him before this guy ends up getting big, I think you're a little late to that dance. And I think that all of these, at the very least, the efforts to censor him have not worked. And at the worst, they've backfired and made him stronger. Again, this is from the pro-censorship position. Now, from my position, I just think it is so bad for society. It's just not good. It's not good. Somebody said to me the other day that and I got a few comments like this, that they were outraged that I platformed Nick Fuentes. And I just couldn't even believe it. I just couldn't even believe someone was still saying that. Like, it was like a weird, it's almost like, like when you see those old Mamdani tweets and he had things where they just sound like a woke Mad Lib. Like, he was like, defunding the police is queer liberation. And you're like, what does that even mean? It's like, I felt like that. People go, did you platform Nick Fuentes? I go, I'm sorry. Are you calling from 2017? Like, what? What are you talking about? I didn't platform him. He platformed me, if anything. I mean, I don't know. What do you mean? It's like a ridiculous idea. They were given this. There's this one guy's show that I did. It was like a smaller show. Not knocking him. I like the guy a lot, but it was a smaller show. And then people who were outraged that he platformed me. And you're like, you didn't platform me? Like, what are you talking about? There's just a level that people reach where I think you go, look, as soon as if somebody's got hundreds of thousands of hardcore supporters who are going to listen to everything they do, and then the big shows that they do are going to get millions and millions of views. If you're at that level, you're part of the conversation now, no matter how anyone feels about it. Yeah, there might be things that you disagree with them on. There might even be views they have that you really find abhorrent. Okay, but it's resonating with a large group of people. So you're going to have to take those ideas on now. That is just, to me, so obvious. And I just think it's bad for society to not have these conversations. I think that, look, at least in the conversation with me, I thought there were several things that Nick said that I really appreciated very much. Him coming out and vocally condemning racial hatred and things like this. I think that I don't see who sees that as a bad thing. And you only get that from having conversations. And look, there were other things that I still disagree with Nick about. We have different worldviews in many ways. But it's also a really interesting conversation. And there's no way to reach him or reach the people who listen to him if you don't at least attempt to grapple with what he's putting forward. And, you know, part of the reason why a lot of these guys don't like to go down that path is because Nick is very formidable. And you actually got to work to grapple with a lot of the stuff that he's putting out there. And so anyway, I just thought that was, and again, just what a win for him. Like it's so short-sighted, I think, to think that this is going to be like what takes someone down. Like, it's just totally, you're doing nothing but convincing people that you are tyrannical in spirit and incapable of actually engaging in the battle of ideas. It's just horrible. So I did want to say that. Big mistake by Spotify. All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is Kalshi. Kalshi is America's first fully regulated prediction market, CFTC approved in all 50 states. You can bet on just about anything on Kalshi, and what I love about it is you can see where the markets are. Like, for example, is Mamdani going to win the race? Well, you can see how many people are betting and what odds the bettors are putting him as. It's always an interesting indication because people are actually putting their money on the line. So they got skin in the game when they're making these bets. Go check it out for yourself. I think you'll have a lot of fun there. Kalshi.com/Dave is the site. KALSHI.com/Dave. Sign up and trade the truth. Kalshi, where your gut meets real money. All right, let's get back into the show. So there's that. And then the other story that came out, which is, I thought of the two kind of, not that they're the same exactly, but that there's some interesting overlap between the two. But so there was this Politico piece about some leaked group chats from young Republicans groups. And these were like from all over the place. This is reading from the Politico piece here. This exchange is part of a trove of Telegram chats obtained by Politico and spanning more than 7 months of messages amongst young Republican leaders in New York, Kansas, Arizona, and Vermont. The chat offers an unfiltered look at how a new generation of GOP activists talk when they think no one is listening. And so the title of the piece is, quote, "I love Hitler. Leaked messages expose young Republicans' racist chat." Okay, so essentially what they have here, and it's interesting because this is one of the dynamics that I talked about when we had Nick on the show. Essentially, the dynamic here is that they've figured out how young men talk. This is not anything new. This is not anything that any real human being doesn't know. It is a weird, a strange characteristic of the now dead legacy media. Like, the corporate media would always have these things. In fact, South Park did a great bit on this over the Tiger Woods thing. I don't know if anyone remembers this. It was an old South Park where it came out that Tiger Woods had been cheating all over his wife or whatever, and then they'd cut to the news and all the men would be acting like they're appalled, like next to a woman. And the woman would be like, "Tiger Woods, geez, why would anyone do that?" And then it would cut to some man and be like, "I know, right? I mean, who would even want to sleep with lots of attractive women?" You know, it's just this weird thing that the media does. I had a bit about this in my first hour about Jake Tapper when he acted like he was appalled over Donald Trump's "grab him by the pussy" comment. Jake Tapper said he played sports in college and he was in a fraternity and he's been in a lot of locker rooms and he's never heard men talk like that. And you're like, dude, what? Like, never heard? Like, I would maybe believe never participated, although, come on, who can really say they've never said offensive things in their life? But never heard. You never heard another dude talking about pussy. This is a foreign concept to you that is like, no, my God. Of course it's not, but there's a thing you do when you put on a suit and tie and you do the old corporate news things and you say, "And action. Earlier today in southern Michigan, there was an incident between blah, blah, blah." And you kind of like assume this fake personality. And then when someone says, like, talks like a regular person, you go, "This was appalling. Outrageous comments made in a hot mic incident." But like, this is just, I don't know. I'm 42. You're talking about young guys here. These are guys in their early 20s, and they're on chat. Me and my friends in our early 20s used to say the most horrible things. And if you go actually read through these chat logs, you can see that like that's what 90% of this is. It's like sarcastic jokes. And anyway, there's obviously, look, Politico is running this piece to say, hey, look, there's a Nazi problem amongst the young Republicans here. Nick Fuentes' show is getting banned on Spotify so they can say, look, this, and it's just, this is one of the things me and Nick talked about, is it's like, is the pretense being set up for the next rollback of free speech, for the next attack? And it's hard to not say, like, you see, we lived in this era of where, you know, like there was tremendous censorship on social media, and that censorship was rolled back, and now you see like more Nazi stuff than ever before, and it's just hard to not look at that and go, oh, okay, is the other shoe about to drop here? Are they about to use this as the excuse to roll these things back? I would just say, as I think I've been consistent on this position for many years now, that the censorship is not the, even if you're very concerned with this trend, you still should be able to understand that censorship is not what leads to a healthy, open society. It's not. It makes this problem worse. And on top of just the fact that it's a horrible thing to do to somebody, it's genuinely wrong. It's a horrible thing to do to somebody, to like take their voice away or attempt to take their voice away. And I never support that. I just think it's wrong. It's like, it's a very fundamental belief. Like, we are all human beings, and all we have in this world really is our mind. Like, that's really what it is to be alive. And to try, you know, to not be a slave and to be a free person is to be allowed to think what you want, and therefore allowed to express what you believe, and also be allowed to get things wrong. You know, there were these standards that were created during like the rise of woke insanity that were just like totally unrealistic standards. It's like cartoonishly unrealistic. And in fact, they seem to be designed to be unrealistic so that there would always be a weapon that you could attack people with. You know, there was one push, I remember for a while, this was like a radical feminist view that did seep a little bit into the mainstream, a little bit. But there was actually a radical feminist view that said, and there were papers written on this and shit, that they called it PIV, I believe, which is penis in vagina. And the argument was that all sex is rape. All sex. Penetration is rape. So, like, what do you even do with that? You're just like, so everyone's a rapist? Every man is a rapist and every woman is a rape victim. Everyone. Well, then, okay, like, what do you do with that? So just everybody's guilty? You just look at it like right immediately. You're just like, well, that's an unworkable standard then, right? And likewise, if the standard is going to be that young men can never be young men, even in a private chat, they can't blow off steam and make offensive jokes. That is a standard that leads to all of the masculine energy being pushed aside. Like, it leads to men, real men, all being excluded, and only the weakest, most feminine men to be allowed in. And it leaves acceptable society with a distinct feminine characteristic. And like, that isn't good. It's not an anti-female thing to say, but like, that is not good. We are yin and yang. There's a reason for both of us. There's a role for both men and women in society. And what do you think it does to those young men when you kick them out of polite society and force them into the dark? Like, what's the goal of this Politico piece? To get all these guys fired and kicked out of politics. It's like, okay. And so where do you think they go from there? Do you think they moderate their position based on that happening to them? You know, especially after the last 15 years of madness, and now coming out of that madness in a world where young people grow up on their phones now. You know, it's not the world that I grew up in. All the crazy things that me and my friends said in our 20s is gone. There's no paper trail. It's not on video, you know? But that's not the reality today. The reality today is it's happening in group chats, and it's happening on social media, and it's happening in 4K. You know, everyone's got a video camera in their pocket at all times, and everyone's got the means by which to share that with the entire world. If we're going to make the standards that if you said something that we consider fucked up, even if it's a joke in your early 20s, that you should be ruined for that, that is like unworkable for society and profoundly unfair to young men. And that's not good for any of us. Okay, I'm gonna wrap there. Thank you guys very much for listening. Traveling tomorrow, but me and Rob will record a few podcasts this weekend, so you'll hear from us soon. Catch you then. Peace.